welcome to Beginning Quilting with Maddie, and I'm Angelique. And today we're going to use these two little rebels to teach Maddie how to quilt her first block. Maddie's first block for her quilt is the broken dish. Do you remember this one?
Oh yeah, it's a good one.
This block has been around since about the 1790s, and it also has some association with the Underground Railroad here in America. They would communicate with quilts. The broken dish quilt represented broken pottery that might be found at the next location or along the trail to let them know that they were on the right track.
Wow.
So that's one of the kind of the fun things about quilting is there's so much history around it, and then we kind of modernize some of that stuff. So this is what we're going to start with today. We have 8 triangles that are aligned together, and the method that we're going to use for coming up with these triangles is making half square triangles that we sew together.
Okay.
And we did cut some blocks in advance. We need to cut a couple more of our vines and our, what I've been calling the spirograph. If we're cutting a lot of blocks, it's good to do strips. And so we're gonna start with our 9.5-inch block. And just because I can't remember the measurement, I want to double check. Yep, 7 inches. You determine the size of the block that you want to cut for the half square triangles based on what you want your final 2, because we're cutting them in half to be.
Okay.
And so 7 is going to get us pretty close, and then we'll be able to trim everything down to its final size.
Awesome.
Okay, so I'm going to find the lines. I've got the 7 here on this edge, and that's pretty straight, and then the 7 on this edge, it's covering all the material, but it looks like we're gonna have to do a little bit of trim afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm gonna use my comfort cutter with the rail system to ride right along and cut that. And I'm doing it backwards. It's like a party trick.
Some people can read upside down and you can cut fabric backwards.
Yeah. And so that's going to give us our cut. I cut this and this one, right? So I'm gonna turn this, and now I can do this in the way I would cut it for realsies.
Yeah.
And so if I have a little wonky edge, at this point I can micro cut to get those little edges off. Okay.
Awesome. Let's see what we can do here. Is this how you would line it up?
Yes.
So that it's, okay. Get my hand on here.
Get right in that track. And that's gonna help you just get very accurate cuts. So you don't have to worry about wandering off, especially, you know, being that you're new to quilting.
Yeah. That's not so bad.
And then just try to remember what sides that you cut,
Yes.
right? When you go to
These
turn it,
ones.
those two, so that you can spin it. So they're now going to be your edges.
Yeah, okay. So then I line it up the same way.
Same way, so now those should match on your 7s perfectly.
All right.
Good enough.
Good enough.
So at this point, you know, as long as it's not too short, we will be fine.
Okay.
Because our half square triangles are going to be just slightly bigger than they need to be for the block. And that's good because you can always cut down. Okay, we're going to get your block ready. It really doesn't matter which one you flip on which side. I just have a tendency, because I know that the marker is going to work better on the lighter fabric. So like this one's, you know, I could see it, but it's still kind of dark in comparison.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my darker fabric, and then I'm going to take my other piece and I'm going to line it on top.
Okay, so that their front sides are
Right,
together.
well, we call that right sides.
Right sides.
Right
Oh,
sides
okay.
together. So wrong side
Okay.
and then right sides, okay? And I'm gonna do that. And if it helps, especially in the very beginning, it's nice to go ahead and clip them a little bit so they don't move on me when I draw.
Okay.
I'm a lot more comfortable now, but you know, this is kind of how I did it in the beginning.
Yeah.
The next thing I want to do is I want to draw a straight edge
Okay.
diagonally from corner to corner on my light side. And that's the only reason I want the light side is just so I can see my line really well.
Yeah.
Okay? This is an erasable pen. It will wash out and it will also iron out.
Cool.
All right, so that's what I'm going to do on all of my pieces. I'm going to work on these while you work on those.
Sounds good.
All All right, we're back and we have done 4 pairs of this one here, which is the spirograph on the vines, on the green vines. And we did 6 of your off-white on that funny, funky pattern with your leaf stripes, all right?
Yeah.
So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take your stack to the machine and we're gonna walk through the process of making just 1 block so that you can see how we end up with the 2 half square triangles.
Awesome.
Okay, so let's take your stack over there.
Okay.
All right, so we're at the machine. I'm gonna just take over for the very first one so I can show you the process, okay? All right, so I'm gonna start with my leader and I'm just gonna sew off it a little bit, okay? And this line that we drew, we're not sewing on the line.
Okay.
Where this is going to be the line that we cut that's gonna create our seam allowance.
Oh.
So we're going to sew 1/4 of an inch on both sides of this line.
Okay.
So that is, if I had it set like this, I'm gonna sew on the line. So I'm actually gonna sew to the left side first,
Okay.
okay? And I'm gonna line up this edge of the foot here, because this is gonna give me my 1/4 of an inch as I
Okay.
sew across. And because I am sewing on that, starting at that point, I do have the leader. I like to start a little slow at first,
Okay.
just to make sure I've grabbed the material and the material doesn't get sucked into the machine. We're gonna
Okay.
talk a lot more about that on your second block, because there's a lot more points in your second block. Okay. Okay, so I can only do 1/4 of an inch on one side, okay, because the other one's 1/8 of an inch.
Okay.
So I have to flip my material around to get that lined up. Now, depending on the machine or the 1/4 of an inch foot that you have at home, sometimes they have 1/4 of an inch on both sides and then you can flip-flop.
Yeah.
But this one, you can't. Which is pretty standard because it's nice to have that 1/8 of an inch.
Yeah.
Because there are times where you want a smaller seam. All right, we're back at the cutting board. Now we have our 2 stitches. We're gonna cut along this line.
Okay.
And this is one of the few times that I just really like the regular rotary cutter, just so I can see it better when I'm cutting it. I just feel more confident that way.
Yeah.
Because I want to be able to see that line. I don't want that line to get covered. Okay, so that's that. And if we unfold them, we now have 2 half square triangles.
Oh.
We'll talk about pressing these later when we get ready for the next assembly. So I'm going to have you go back to the machine and do one exactly the way I just did it.
Okay.
Okay?
Let's do it.
All right. All right, do you want to walk me through the process verbally before you get started?
Sure. Okay. So I'm gonna take my squares and then I'll line up, after I sew through the leader, I'll line this up with the outside of the foot.
Correct.
So that way I'm sewing here, not on the line.
Perfect.
Okay, awesome. Let's try it, I guess.
And then you can really just kind of use both of your hands here to guide.
Okay.
So you don't really have to pull it through, you're just trying to keep it straight. With feed dogs, you're gonna pull it through. Now and again, when I have a thick seam or something, I wanna kind of give it a little bit of a tug, but you know, on your domestic machines, that's a good way to break a needle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then don't forget to lift your needle
Oh, thank you.
and then pull it out a little bit and then trim.
Snip my leader.
You're good.
Okay.
Okay, but
My
so
brain.
if you sewed on this side, so your edge of your foot needed to be on the right side of your line, right?
Yes.
So that means to have it on the right side of the line, you have to flip your line.
I see. Okay. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Lining up with the edge of the foot. Lining the line I drew up with the
Correct.
edge of the foot. Okay. And then I will start going.
You just feel like that gets in your way and just kind of push it out of the way. Or you can stop and trim it off at the very beginning.
Okay.
And don't forget to bring that needle up.
Thank you. I will always forget to bring the needle up, apparently. All right.
It just makes it ready for the next time you go, too. And you're not pulling as much on the needle with it being in with the bobbin. It kind of releases those two things.
Okay.
Just makes it a little bit easier. All right, so now we're going to go cut it. So back to the cutting station.
You make it look so easy to line up your ruler, but I don't have that muscle memory yet.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're just trying to get it on, and you want your blue to be showing just a smidgen, because think about like when you drew it, right? It's up against, but that means it's slightly over, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're an artist, you know, like when you do that, you're, you know, you've got the ruler a little bit in the way.
Yes,
so.
Exactly.
Okay. There you go.
I did it.
All right, and so when you unfold them, you have your half square triangles.
There they are.
All right, so that's just the basics of making one, but we have a bunch to make.
Yes.
So I want to show you the chain method.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to start the same way. So I get that edge of this part of the foot on there, just like we did before. So I'm going to run past, and instead of flipping it and flipping it over, I'm just going to do my whole stack.
Oh.
So this is chain piecing.
Okay.
So I'm just going to do all my left side first. So this becomes the leader for the next one.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And then once I'm done with the chains, then I'm just going to flip it and do it on the other side.
Oh,
starting with
easy
the leader.
peasy.
So do you feel like you could do that by yourself?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I'll work on my stack and you work on yours.
Okay.
Okay, so the thing I didn't tell you, because it's something I have to kind of show you, is this was your last one. That was your first one.
Yes.
So go ahead and start your leader. You're now going to start at your last one.
Oh,
Right?
okay.
That way you don't twist your fabric around.
I see.
And that's going to get you in the correct position.
Okay. Cool.
Now we're ready to do our assembly of our final block. This is a little tool that you can make, and we talked about making these in a summer episode as a way to get your blocks ready for sewing. So if you remember, this is the pattern we're trying to make, right? So a couple things I can show you is with half square triangles, and it's one of the reasons why half square triangles are so popular. There are a lot of different ways to arrange them. So I can arrange it like this, and I'm going to get a diamond, right? But that's not the shape that we want. We could alternate them to get the darker diamond on the inside, right? We can turn a couple of them, which is what we're doing to create this look here. Okay.
Cool.
And so it doesn't really matter if you're more comfortable following this to look exactly how it looks like this, then it would look like this, right? So that it matches that.
Yeah.
But then if I spin it, it's still going to be the same.
Yeah.
Right. So you can also do chain piecing with this as well when you got several. But what we're going to do next is we have to decide if we want to sew these together or these together first.
Okay.
And for some blocks, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
This is a block, it really doesn't matter. So what I tend to do is I tend to just go ahead and get them all stacked on my little design board to take
Okay.
over to my machine. And now I know what's going to go with what.
Okay.
So you get just a couple set up.
Yeah.
So now we want to think about how we want to do these. So like I said, this block, it really doesn't matter, all right? You can do horizontal or you can do vertical. I'm kind of a horizontal girl, so I'm going to take the right one, flip it over to the left one.
Okay.
And once I flip it over, I have this seam here, and this seam here. And when I finish this, I want these points to match up. Okay?
Yeah.
So when I line this in here, I just want to make sure that I have it in the right place so that those will line up. So when I get the final thing together, all 4 points will be easier to, and we'll also have to nest seams there as well. So once I get that where I want, I clip only on the side that I need to sew.
Okay.
Okay. That helps me remember that by the time I go from here to the machine, what side to sew, and I don't mix it up. So that's just, you can clip all the way around, but for me, I will then forget.
Yeah.
All right, so now we have our pieces and you're just separating them from the chain stitching. So we want to rearrange them back on here to match our pattern. Sometimes I do end up sewing it wrong. I just confuse myself, and there was a chance that I did that over there. So we're just going to lay it back on to match our pattern.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't. Yay, I didn't mess it up.
All right.
It's looking very pretty.
Yeah.
I'm really, really liking how this is coming out.
Cute.
Okay, this is where saying light to dark doesn't always work because we want to be able to nest our seams, okay? So this is how we want it to be. I want to flip it over all the way so I can take a look, all right? So these need to go opposite each other, all right? So that means that the way that I finger pressed one wouldn't work very well, okay? So it would be better if it was on the other side so that when I put them together, because that's where I'm going to sew, I can create that nested seam.
Okay.
And so you can press it at the mat. I feel confident and comfortable enough with some of these smaller ones to just get that lined up. Now I can see that, remember I told you these weren't perfectly cut, and I do have a little bit of an edge here because what mattered was up here.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a little hard for me to line up. So doing a little micro cutting just to even that out will be fine. So I just want to kind of even this one out here that's a little too long.
Right.
So if you get a few like that, because like you said, you know, you had one that was a little wonky when you cut it, that will work. Again, it really does matter on the type of block that you're doing. Some blocks have to be extremely precise, but the ones that we picked are great for someone that needs to learn to get comfortable with those skills. So I'm just matching that up. All right, so now that's gonna line up. So again, I flip that over, and I don't want them to be on the same side. Can you see how they're on the same side? That's not gonna work. That's not nesting. So since I like the placement of that one and I can do the light to dark, I just flipped it over so I have control of that.
Yeah.
And it's a feel. Like when you are properly nested, it's gonna feel kind of nice and smooth, and you can use a pin or a clip to hold that. If it's overlapping, you're gonna feel a lump.
Okay.
Right, it's going to feel like that doesn't feel like it's flush in there.
Yeah.
And then if it's wide apart, then you're going to feel the wideness. If it's just a hair off, you may not feel that. So that's where kind of getting in there. And then I always clip that seam. That's a very, very important place where I'm going to put the stuff together. So I want to make sure I know when I get to my machine to slow down and really make sure where it needs to be before I sew over that. Okay. And then I just do a couple other clips. If I've got a block that has some other seams that were put together, I'll use the clips to hold those seams. All right, so you're gonna stop because you gotta take your clip off.
Okay.
Right, and so this is where you also wanna make sure you stayed in there, and sometimes it's helpful to have a tool to make sure things stayed, you know, the way they were supposed to be on both sides.
I think it
like,
looks pretty good.
Yeah, like on this, yep.
Okay.
And if it helps you to, because for me, I can't get my finger, and I don't want to run over my finger, but you also don't want to hit the needle on the metal
With the
thing,
metal,
so
yeah.
be careful.
I won't get it too close.
And then once you get it over, it's now locked, and now it's just, you know, keeping these edges flush with each other as you're kind of moving through. And you can kind of check that as you go. You should have just a little bit of overlap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like I said, they do like to move.
Yeah.
Good job.
All right, we did it.
All right, lift your needle and your foot. All right, so we're going to unveil and see if we got our points lined up. Dun, da, da, da. All right, perfect, right? So we wanted all these points to line up in the corner, and they do.
Wow.
So now we want to do a final press, and so you're going to notice that you have seams that are already over from where we did this. But this seam here, we have to decide how we want to iron it down.
Yeah.
Now you could just pick a side and press it down, but if you feel here when you do that, you've got a thicker spot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so sometimes depending on the block pattern, there's not much you can do, right? You're just gonna have a bigger piece if you have a bunch of points that are coming. But with this one, or with pinwheels, we do have an option, and that option is to pop the seam.
Okay.
Okay, so what that means is if I pull one side versus the other, I get this little pinwheel in the middle.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So this is, there you go. Do you see it?
Yeah.
You see the difference?
Yeah.
All right, so some seams you want to press open. I really don't press a lot of my seams open because it does weaken the stitches in comparison to having them folded over.
Yeah.
So this helps to flatten it out a little bit, but keep them together. When you press the seam open, you can sometimes see your stitching in here, and we don't want to do that. All right, so let's just go over here to the ironing board real quickly and lock that press in.
Okay.
So we're back from the ironing board. You can see that we've pressed it nicely on both sides. So we have it, you know, exactly how we want it, and our block is almost finished. We just want to save ourselves some time for later and get these down to the 12.5. I just want to make sure that this diagonal line is going to go through my center point here, okay, and it does. And it looks like I really don't need to trim. It's pretty good the way it is. And let's take a look at yours. You got like one edge that's a little funkier. It'll be okay. But everything is here. I think some of this is a little bit just in the pressing and being a little bit careful in your seam allowances.
Yeah.
And it does look like your seam allowance is a little bit thicker.
Yeah, there
if
were
you look at
definitely
mine.
some moments where it got away from me.
Yeah, so I can see here, you're off a little bit on that seam allowance. So remember, it's not the long edge, it's the short edge of the foot, and you do want that. Basically, this block is done once you get them all ready, and we're going to move on to the next block. We started with what I thought of the three was probably the easiest block, and this one was going to be the old windmill that we do next. We're going to do a totally different method with this one. We're actually going to be cutting our blocks.
Oh.
So we're not going to do the layer thing that we did here. So it's going to be a little bit different. Thanks again for joining us on Beginning Quilting with my friend Maddie.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.